Today we are going to be talking about where this overall pullback may end and get you guys those updated daily expected moves. And thank you so much to my Patreon members out there, because we are updating you with those daily expected moves for every stock that we're going to cover today. Tonight after this video, and we're going to get into some technical analysis across the board for the SPY Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Nvidia, AMD, and Meta. Gonna look over at AMC and GME. They are testing some key levels, so it's important to watch that, and maybe touch a little bit on volatility and TLT. So let's get into it. On that 30-minute chart, we were talking about this being a 30-minute cup and handle, and has this overall played out? And that's something that we need to see. I mean, is this actually going to be done from these areas? Well, you would maybe say you need to head a little bit lower. So something we can do for right now is get you guys those daily expected moves. We do have 596.28 to the upside, and we do have 590.42 to the downside. Now, the best place for the 2-hour to get this 2-hour MACD down by that center line for us to see some kind of swing trade to the upside would actually be right here. Okay, so 590.42 to the downside, and we do have the weekly range right there. This should be a great level of support, and if we want to keep pulling down on that 2-hour, this is where we'll pay attention if we're able to see some kind of bounce. We don't have to bounce right away, right? We could try to carve out a bottom, but in case we V-shape, that is where I would be paying attention, because we do not have any big signals up here on the 2-hour to say that this has to fall down. If we really zoom out, we've gotten rid of all of those signals that we had back into here. With that big move from the election, we gapped above the place where we would have seen resistance and seen that come in. So now we have the opportunity to see this 2-hour, if it's going to curl up into positive territory, hey, we can see some positive things, and maybe we do create some kind of reversal signal, and that would take place outside of a monthly expected move. And we'll give you updated weekly expected moves on Sunday, so make sure you're subscribed, and thank you so much for liking the video. Now, if we're going to see this fall down further, it would make sense, right? We have some bigger time frames that do not want to cross. So I am assuming that in this next 4-hour bar, tomorrow is going to be very important if we're going to continue to head in this direction and keep this overall positivity going. Because if this 4-hour starts to turn down, we might end up being in a more prolonged pullback and end up next week down into test this zone to really grab some buyers. And if we do end up down in that zone by that time, we're probably going to see some basing out signals if we're actually going to bounce, and we will notify you about that. But just be aware that this 4-hour hasn't crossed. So tomorrow morning, holding up in this area is going to be very important, and we'll see if that bullish thing can happen. Now, we do have to be open and aware of us potentially seeing a bigger pullback, because this 4-hour has crossed for the Qs. If this is going to be some kind of blip, well, then this 2-hour is going to be able to most likely hold up, and we're going to see a good reaction from a key level. And let's talk about those key levels. The daily expected move for tomorrow is 511.89 to the upside, and we do have 505.49 to the downside. Now, you don't have to get down here early on in the day, right? We could do something like this, just curl up into positive territory. But the important thing is we have no reversal signals here. So if we're talking about some kind of major reversal, we're going to have to see a chart that we're very confident in order for this to be some kind of random downturn. If there's not going to be any signals to say, hey, we're going to go into a correction or something like that, well, this is where I wanted to talk about. You need to cross down on the weekly scale. Right now, you are crossed up on the weekly scale with room on the Qs to head higher. So if this is going to be a top in some way for maybe a corrective move, right? Corrective move for the rest of the year, well, then we're going to see that weekly crossover. That is not what I'm leaning towards. A lot of the time with these squeezes, and you end up going sideways and then you dip down, it's just because people have taken too many calls. Right? People have taken too many calls, so they're like, we need these people to get bearish so that we can really send this thing up for the next push higher. So that is what I would be aware of. You have the 2-hour getting close by the center line, so be open to the opportunity if that crosses up, because that most likely will take out these highs and go make a new one. And we have a monthly expected move for you that I think you can pay attention to going into next week. Apple, this is great to finally see that extension, right? We were really waiting, you know, are we going to see this as resistance? Are we going to curl up and go positive? We were able to go positive, and we're seeing some of that positivity. Will that continue? Well, we always have to be aware of that crossing back down, but as we get above 225.84, it is very likely to go up to these areas at some point to test that level. That level was very important in the past, very important here, very important here, very important here. It's just a very important level. level. So we'll see if that is going to reach up towards that area, and then we can talk about it. For the 30-minute here, if this wanted to back off, would it be overly bearish? Not necessarily. So the 2-hour, you really want that to continue for positivity. If we're going to reload, see some kind of dip down, look for that 225.84 to become support and see that thing swing back up to the upside, and then we'll watch out for any reversal signals here for Apple. Tesla dipping down on that 30-minute, weren't able to hold up at a 5-day moving average, and that's important because the 2-hour was able to cross, and that was suggesting more of a pullback to come. So if we're going to continue that and actually try to round out this, just a quick note, Tesla does not have reversal signals. You have a flat divergence across the way, so yes, this can be a more meaningful pullback. We can keep going in this pullback, but you still have room to that center line before you could get that curl up into positive territory on the 2-hour. Key thing with this is implied volatility for the daily expected move tomorrow is pretty big. So if you are trading Tesla, it would be good to join the Patreon because you can get those expected levels. That is data that is priced in from the options market, and we just calculate that for you, and we put it out on Patreon every single Thursday night so that you can see it going into Friday close. It's very useful. Now, if this is going to be more than a 2-hour pullback, well, the 4-hour is kind of suggesting that for Tesla. So if we're not able to hold up at a daily expected move, we continue the downside. That would make total sense because, well, we shouldn't be surprised if Tesla wants to reach down towards even 271 or something like that to see another move higher, because this is this is already crossed and it's away from that center line. So if that needs to go to that center line and then cross up, we can look out for reversal signals once we take out that high. I do not have reversal signals here for Tesla, so I should assume that this is a positive trend, and the trend most likely will continue in the upward direction once it's done with its pullback. Amazon is one stock that is saying something a little bit different, okay? Amazon is saying, I have some major weakness here. We're talking about those 4 hours pulling back. If those dailies can cross, we can get a daily pullback in a lot of these charts. We're just going to talk about that more tomorrow, or more on Saturday when we do our macro video, so make sure you're subscribed. But we see here 2-hour divergence, right? We see 2-hour divergence here for Amazon, which tells us Amazon could see more weakness here. Okay, so that just tells us, hey, a daily scale can start to roll here for Amazon. If this is going to be a more extended pullback, we can see a couple areas where you really broke out from. Where this level of about 200, I think, is a good one. I think that's my favorite level for Amazon to dip down to if we see this daily pullback. But we can head a little bit lower and go down towards 194.37. Those are two levels that seem to be very good for some kind of retest of breakout areas, right? This little box in here is what I'm paying attention to. So what that would do is, if the opportunity is going to present itself on the daily scale, I like swing trades on bigger time frames. They're fantastic. If Amazon wants to make another upward move, that'd be great. It does not have any daily reversal signals. Those are the signals that we're really looking for if something's going to have more of a corrective move, a bigger overall pullback. That's what we're paying attention to there. Now, something you can pay attention to for tomorrow is this downturn from the 30-minute. I know the 2-hour is there. I know that 2-hour divergence is there. But look what happened last time. We were controlled. We hit the 5. We head in the upward direction. We're controlled. What if we hit that 5 and then we head in the upward direction? I just want you to notice this is bigger than this. So you are getting tighter, right? You're getting tighter in these pullbacks. You're getting a massive move, and then this, another big move, and then this, and then maybe you get a small move. And really that is the signal we're looking for. If that creates a divergence really close to the center line, Amazon might be getting a later pullback, or we might be getting a bigger pullback across the board according to Amazon next week. NVIDIA still bottling up in this area, really getting up to a key level and still consolidating. So it's really testing this level down here, and that's very important because if this 30-minute is saying anything, it's like, I'm still by the center line. I still haven't chosen a direction. So something we need to happen here is the 2-hour. Look at the 2-hour. It still has opportunity to do this longer, right? Just keep moving sideways, build that liquidity, and then see a good move to the upside. We'll see what happens with this, but for the most part, you can see I really would like to see some kind of reversal signal to say, hey, this can go negative if I'm going to talk negatively about it. So I'm paying attention to the fact that the 2-hour does not necessarily have a divergence in the near price action. It is holding some kind of weakness from across the way, but it's just rather flat in the nearest one. So I'm more leaning towards some kind of move that will end up getting us higher than these points in here, and then seeing that reversal signal pop up for us for NVIDIA. That's something I'm paying attention to. We'll have to see if this disrupts anything according to the fact that AMC and GME are starting to do some crazy stuff. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. Now we're going to talk about something interesting, and that is AMD. We're talking about some potential pullback, maybe that pullback ending tomorrow, but we're also talking about something with AMD here, and that is it has a big divergence here on the 2-hour. Okay, it has a big divergence here on the 2-hour. Very, very clean, very nice. These are the setups that I love, because if this crosses on that MACD, well, if the only thing that would really add to this is if it's outside of a weekly expected move. And guess what? It's outside of a weekly expected move. So you have a higher probability to do this tomorrow than to do that. And that's very important, because if you're outside of that weekly expected move and you see a reversal signal like this, and it has to confirm, but if that can confirm and get back into that zone, that means AMD might be reversing around this trend and actually see an uptrend for some days here. So I'd pay attention to that, because the daily chart can actually cross up because of this. So that's something to pay attention to with AMD. Very, very good signal. I'm just going to show it one more time, because that is what you're looking for. This is what we're talking about in the course. We'll see if that actually confirms. That's important. We go over that in the course as well. That's down there in the description. You only have a couple weeks to get that for only $100. It's 90% off until the end of November. Grab that while it lasts, but you can see that this 2-hour divergence looks so clean. If that would just confirm, I'd be a little bit happy with it. But one thing I do notice here is the 30-minute. We are getting these divergences down here, but they are kind of wonky. You're not necessarily seeing the best, the cleanest divergences on the 30-minute. So there is a chance that you pop up like this on Friday, you drop down one more time, and you create that stronger base without turning up that 2-hour. If that 2-hour turns up, maybe we'll get a little higher low for the 30-minute for AMD. You're starting to see how these 2 hours really look like, hey, we could see something good here. Now, Meta coming up to that little zone up here that it really has seen some bad things happen. So in order to break through that zone, you might want to be pretty controlled. You might want to see some good price action to the upside. We saw this rapid move up, faded right away. So we know that's a key level for this week. Maybe going into next week, if we can see this thing curl up into positive territory, that would lean towards positivity. One thing to be aware of with Meta is the fact that it rejected on the daily scale. So this thing really will be important tomorrow, because if you start to turn down on this daily even more from here, it's telling you, hey, I do have potential to go negative here. And that's very interesting to see from Meta. One thing that I am thinking here is I don't necessarily have the best reversal signals in the world, right? I don't really have those reversal signals to say, hey, this has to head down, or this has a higher probability to head down. All I have is price action is below all those moving averages on the 2-hour. If we want to see positivity, you got to curl up that MACD, and you've been building in this area for quite some time. Yes, it's been wonky, but you're still building in this general area pretty much since all the way back in, let's see this point here. Since all the way back in the 19th of September. Okay, so you're still at these levels, above those levels from the 19th of September, and you've really just been, fudging around ever since, doing things like this. So if that 2-hour can turn up into positive territory, I would be likely to see us take out the high and go make a new one. One thing that you want to be aware of when you're building a lot in these moves is if that move goes up like this, and then crosses back down, just be aware if that is some kind of trap. We will try to notify you about that live if that is happening throughout next week, because I think it'll take some time to come to fruition, and then we'll have to see what happens on the daily scale, as that has rejected at this point, but it's relatively controlled except for this move. AMC was very close to seeing something crazy. It was very, very close to seeing something crazy. Now, we did notify you guys about GameStop giving the 30-minute divergence. We kind of showed you on the 15 a couple times, like, hey, there's 15-minute divergence all across this move for AMC. So weakness coming in at that weekly expected move, and we see the weakness come in. This is where the fight really begins. And if these levels are becoming very key right now. So if you want these levels and you want the downside level, that's on Patreon. But on Sunday, we will update this level for you. So make sure you're subscribed so you can get that info on Sunday after we do our little macro video on Saturday. But AMC, very, very good here, because it got by that center line. It really looked like it was going to cross up and see something crazy. And that's exactly what can happen above that purple line that we're going to update on Sunday. But then it falls back down. Problems happening here. The 2-hour looks like it really wants to cross. We'll see if that happens tomorrow. The 30-minute is still positive. So negativity, the bear side would be if that 2-hour is able to cross down, bad things can happen, right? This thing can go all the way back down to 437. Maybe it goes to a weekly expected move next week. But for the 30-minute, if this thing can just turn up into positive territory, you still have the 2-hour positive, you still have the daily positive, and if this 30-minute can whip back up, you might see this. And if it closes outside of here on Friday, I would watch out for Monday, because AMC could do something crazy on Monday if they've run out of liquidity to fight the stock, and that's key to understand. This is still a battle. You want to understand that this is a battle. Therefore, it is very, very good to manage risk in all of the positions that you take towards AMC and GME. And GME, very key here. You have a situation here with GME that is mixed. Okay, at the tops, you see all of this divergence at these tops for the 30-minute. You see all those divergences, and yet we have not seen downward pressure yet. We have not seen us lose that 5. We have not seen this escalate to the downside. So right now it is crossed down. We should assume that 30-minute is going to continue. Friday is the day that they like to fight the stock. Okay, they do not want this to close above this line by Friday. That can cause a lot of problems for them. This alone can already be causing problems for them. And notice where we keep gravitating to. Let's see, we gravitate to 28.21. We gravitate and actually touch on 28.21. We gravitate and touch on 28.21. So what do you think they do not want you to close above? I'd probably say 28.21. I'd probably say that's an important level, and we're going to update that level for you for free, completely free on YouTube on Sunday. Okay, we're going to give you that updated level. If you want the bottom side expected move for GameStop and AMC, you can join the Patreon down in the description. We just noticed that this is divergence, which likes to curl down 2-hour charts, and that happened. Now, one thing is, that happened at the end of the day. The 2-hour bar at the end of each day is the one that's a little sketchy, okay? It does not have a full 2 hours in it, so that's important to understand. And notice when we said, watch out, because this weekly chart, remember we were talking before the election, the weekly chart crossed over, confirming divergence for the SPY, confirming divergence for the Qs. What was the thing we said could be a blip? You didn't close below the 9-week moving average that time. What's happening here? You're getting it at the end of the day. You're not closing below that 9 for the 2 hours. So that's important, because that actually could mean this is a blip. And if you just see that 30-minute whip back around and you close in these areas, that can be a big, big problem for these hedge funds. And I want you to understand that. Now, if this is going to continue and we get a more of a follow-through bar and we lose that 5, then most likely GME is going to pull back. Where can that pull back to? Well, we give you a good level to pay attention to over on Patreon every single week. We update you about that. But I think I'm leaning towards this area here, 2360. 2360 is something I am paying attention to. Now, if this is going to elongate and curl over a daily, we'll have to talk about lower levels, okay? But it's important to understand, they don't want this to happen. If you close outside of here, you're not only closing outside of a weekly expected move, you're starting to close outside of monthly expected moves. You're halfway in the month, so they can fight the stock, right? 68% chance to drop from that, but if you want to see something crazy, you got to take out those levels, and GameStop is doing it. I'm going to quickly touch on TLT. TLT has been doing some interesting stuff. We keep getting more data, and it seems like for some reason, the data's like perfect every single time, right? Their forecast is really matching up to the data, to the actual data drop these days, which is interesting. But notice this about today. Where did we gravitate to? Well, if you're part of Patreon, you know we tested that weekly expected move. What can you do with that weekly expected move once you get below it? You can use it as resistance. So in order for this to head in the upward direction, we do get retail sales tomorrow, so this can affect that. But for the most part, we can see this 2 hour has not crossed. If that 2 hour is not crossed up, then this flat divergence, which has a bunch of divergence behind it all throughout this move, is not going to see price action go up, right? If this is not crossing, then we're not going to see that land back in that move. But that's just the thing. You have a 68% chance to land up tomorrow by the end of the day above these levels. So that's something to pay attention to. That can say that I'm in a daily uptrend for a little bit of time, and this might just reject. If the daily scale does start to turn down, this can really escalate to the downside. So I highly encourage people to, at all times, we encourage this, make sure to wait for confirmations. Make sure to at least make 75% of the bar completed before you get that trade in place, because confirmation is very important to momentum, and it's very important to the algorithms, right? Those little timestamps. But also, we need to be aware of managing risk here, because if this crosses down on the daily, it does not have to make a divergence. It is not outside of a monthly expected move at this point for TLT, so we can see yields go higher and TLT drop off, and that has been happening for a while. Am I leaning towards that? No, I think we're building to actually see a pop, but it doesn't mean we can't get some kind of reaction down before that happens, so manage risk. Volatility, you're noticing, still holding that crash signal, but that bear market behavior ended up being, oh, well, we crossed to the downside. So this was about to pop off with that election, and that gap saved the market. It genuinely saved the market. And we always said, if that daily does cross down, watch out, because that's most likely going to short squeeze, and that's exactly what we got. It just happened to be a big gap, and that's unfortunate as a trader. You don't like to see a massive gap like this, but we left behind a big gap, so most likely we're going to fill that at some point. When will that happen? So as we're still squeezing, we're going more negative. The daily scale is that close to popping back up. Weirdly enough, right now, if we're going to get a little bit bigger pullback here, weirdly enough, volatility is showing the 2-hour divergence. The SPY is not. So I'm a little bit hesitant in saying, hey, this is going to be some kind of big move from volatility. But it does say, hey, I can go into a positive trend. I can curl up the daily scale. If the daily scale does turn up, we can see a little bit more than a pullback. Maybe we get that corrective move right now. So that's something key to understand. You do have the 50, sorry, I was hiccuping. The 50 is still above the 200, so you have to have your blinker lights on. You have to be a little bit cautious going forward. And that's all we have to really say about volatility is watch out, because it does have a signal that says it can pop off, but you don't have that same signal on the SPY. And what I would like us to see is, if we're going to see some kind of pop here, well, then have it turn back down, and maybe we end up making that signal later on, right? Maybe we make that little signal later on, which is at the same time as the SPY, and that's what I'm going to be looking for from volatility. All right, guys, so the main takeaway here is, hey, we're in this overall 2-hour pullback. We see these 2 hours cross down, and the 2-hour is the one that we were leaning towards because, well, we're actually seeing this thing curl down on a 2-hour, and that's the bigger time frame, so that makes total sense. That cup and handle is starting to play out to the downside. We do have some key levels to pay attention to for tomorrow. If that pullback is going to extend and get a little bit more dramatic, I'd be paying attention to this little gray zone in here, because that can be where some buyers step back in. We do not have reversal signals on the 2-hour that say we're going to have a massive drop here, so just pay attention to that. And make sure to trade like water, and that's something that we always like to shout out in these videos. Trade like water, move around those rocks. Tomorrow we have retail sales, so make sure to see what the direction is, see what levels we're hitting, and see if we're curling up on these MACDs. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for liking and subscribing and getting all the stuff down in the description. You guys are fantastic, and I look forward to streaming with you guys tomorrow morning, all right? Peace out.